Hi there, welcome to MiWeek. I'm Christy McDonald. It has been a week of change here in Michigan. The announcement of yet another retirement among senior members of Michigan's congressional delegation. Who fills the leadership void and what this means for Michigan. Also, General Motors CEO Mary Barra takes the heat from Congress on the auto company's ignition problems. Plus, change in Detroit's bankruptcy plan of adjustment. The longer time goes by, the deals aren't getting any better. And President Obama brings his minimum wage message to Michigan. It is all coming up for you tonight, but we do start tonight with more political shockers. This week, Congressman Dave Camp from the 4th District announced he was retiring after 23 years in Washington. And that was just days after Republicans got the sudden and bad news that Congressman Mike Rogers was retiring. Add that to Democrat Congressman John Dingell and Senator Carl Levin, who we already knew were leaving. You have some serious turnover in Michigan's congressional delegation. How does this impact the kind of clout that Michigan has in Washington? And for Republicans, this is a serious scramble to find the next generation of leadership. Let's get to it tonight with our MiWeek contributors, Nolan Finley of the Detroit News and Stephen Henderson of the Detroit Free Press. Gentlemen, it's good to see you.
It's good to be here.
Yeah, you had a nice time off last week. We're glad you are back. So let's get started.
Never mind all that. What about those cats?
You know, I know you always wanted to start with basketball in the NCAA. Here in Michigan, we're not too thrilled with the Kentucky Wildcats.
It was a good game.
Great game.
Payback for 20 years ago when we beat them in the final.
20 years ago. We're going to have to do a little bit better in recent times now.
That's right.
All right, well, we'll be watching this weekend. All right, let's get on to the serious stuff, though. If you're the Republicans, you have to be saying, whoa, what just happened in the last week for the Michigan congressional delegation, and how are we going to replace that kind of senior leadership?
Well, Republicans and Democrats, if you look at the landscape this year, you've got 4 open congressional seats and an open Senate seat. You've got to count the Gary Peters seat because he's leaving that open. That's an open race. Right. This is the most interesting and intense congressional election I can remember. You've got 5 open congressional seats and 5 or 6 others that are going to be competitive. And that just goes against sort of the grain in recent years where redistricting has made these seats fairly safe. You've got a wide open congressional contest this time.
You know, when you think about when they've given their notice that they're going to retire, they have thought about this a little beforehand? Mike Rogers says he's going to go have a radio career. Yeah. Now, Dave Camp just said he is done. He hasn't said what he's going to do after this. But should they have given a little bit more leeway and heads up?
I mean, I think if you're both parties, you absolutely want them to give you more time to find somebody to replace them and to raise the money. You know, these seats are very expensive to run for now. It used to be a couple $100,000 you would see to spend on a congressional seat. Now we're up in the millions. Yeah. It's really hard to get that cash together. I am a little suspicious that Mike Rogers probably knew that this was in the works, you know, earlier, and that's one of the reasons he didn't run for the Senate seat that's open. He would have been, I think,
right. He was up
really,
for Carl
really
Levin's
good.
seat.
I don't think that's why he didn't run for the Senate seat.
No,
but Steve, he certainly knew he was negotiating this deal. And it's possible that he didn't know it was going to come through.
Yeah, right.
But I think Camp is the less excusable one because he cited it as his reason. He's term limited out as chairman. Well, he knew months ago he was going to be term limited out as chairman. They gave these folks 3 weeks to go out there and put together a team to raise signatures and make that decision, make really a life-changing decision in a matter of hours or days, because you can't take, when you only have 3 weeks, you can't take 2 weeks to make up your mind. No. They made it very tough for people to consider and weigh the decision and then go out there and act on it. And I think it hurts Michigan because you're not necessarily going to get the best candidates in the field.
No, you're going to get people who can finance.
Who've been there before.
And who've been there before. The other thing I think is really interesting here is the sort of I've had enough attitude that you're hearing from these people who are leaving. Mike Rogers, because he chairs the House Intelligence Committee, I mean, this is one of the top 5 or 10, in the top 5 or 10 most powerful positions in Washington. I mean, he really is in senior leadership. And he's saying, look, I feel like I can move the ball more, I can get more done if I go be a radio host.
And that's I think that's a sad state of affairs.
It says
quite honestly.
everything about what's going on in Congress.
And I would also say that Dave Camp has also been considered that kind of guy who has worked on both sides of the aisles. He even tried to have some kind of tax reform in the last couple of months and really went at it. And then for him all of a sudden to be like, you know what, I am not going to run again.
I think it is too hard. You heard John Dingell say when he retired, you know, this is not the same place I joined in terms of getting stuff done and working together. I think, you know, there is a real problem with the way Congress works, and there's a real frustration among adults who are there to get something done, that you've got a lot of other people who are there to play silly politics all the time.
There's also the personal element. Both of these guys served as chairman, as Steve mentioned, a very powerful committee. Camp was term limited. Rogers
as
chairman of the Ways and Means.
But Rogers is not necessarily term limited because that doesn't apply to his position.
Right.
But he couldn't get a commitment that he'd be reappointed. And once you've been chairman and had your fanny kissed and people scraping and bowing to you, and it's Mr. Chairman this and Mr. Chair, it's hard to go back and sit in the bleachers. You know, and Camp specifically cited that you know, he couldn't get his agenda through as chairman. He probably wasn't going to move the needle much when he's not chairman.
What does this mean now for Michigan in terms of the clout that Michigan has in Washington right now and maybe will not have come next fall?
We won't get 2 more chairs out of it, right, in the near term.
And a Senate chair.
And the Senate, that's right, with Levin leaving too, we'll
Armed Services?
I tend to take, you know, the sort of long view of this stuff too, though. Think of how senior the delegation is and was. I mean, that's a problem too, right? That you're not giving younger people the opportunity to go serve. You're not building up the seniority that they need to be chairs of committees and things like that. So, you know, you are losing that clout, but you're also opening up a chance to replenish the bench.
For its size, Michigan had the most clout of any delegation in Washington.
Yes.
And if you look not just at the retirements, but the competitive races, Ben Fioli in Oakley County has a competitive race. Benishek, real competitive race up north. Justin Amash, Wahlberg, all have very competitive races. I think that guy's raising a lot of money. Brian Ellis out there. John Conyers now has a legitimate challenger. You could end up with a delegation that's majority freshmen when this thing's all over.
So where is the next generation of leadership? Where are we going to see these candidates start to come from? And they've got to come out in the next 3 weeks.
Well, that's the one benefit of term limits. That you've got a lot of term limits, limited lawmakers looking for things to do, still interested in politics, and I think the bulk of these slots will be filled by folks who are term limited out of the legislature.
And I think people will also be looking at now party switch. Are we going to see these Republican seats in the 4th and the 8th possibility going to the Democrats? I
think that's a tough. The 4th, I don't think you have much chance at all. I mean, these districts were drawn in 2010 in very safe ways, both on the Democratic side. The seats that are Democratic now are very safe Democratic. The ones on the Republican side are very safe Republican. I think if you get the right Democrat in the 8th, you know, a Barb Byram, who's the clerk in Lansing, maybe you make that a more competitive seat. But the numbers are just so heavily weighted against that kind of party switch. I think it would take something.
And that's why you don't see a whole lot of Democrats jumping up and saying, I'm going to run for this seat. Like you don't see any Republicans jump up and say, I'm going to run for Peter's seat. They're safely drawn. Where you're likely to see the switch is in that 1st district up north where Benishek 2 elections ago won a Democratic seat. That district is still heavily Democratic, and they've got a good candidate. They're gonna, the National Party is spending a lot of money to get a Democratic elected up there. It's just a matter of time before Benishek loses that seat.
Yeah, I mean, you're right. That's a Democratic seat that they've held for a couple terms, but they won't keep it forever.